creativity is a fairly universal human trait. I think everybody has some level of creativity, whether they know it or not. I guess maybe more accurately, it is the application of innovation or imagination in some field. It doesn't have to be art. It can be practically any field of human endeavor could benefit by creativity, by imagination, by innovation. It's a way of perhaps getting around a problem or an obstacle by non-traditional means. You know, a new way of thinking about something that solves a problem. And I don't remember exactly how I discovered pencil, but I did eventually hit upon the idea of using color pencils. And so it was a pragmatic reason that I started to use pencils initially. And then I fell in love with pencils. It gives you a different kind of control than paints. After a certain amount of time of doing pencils, using pencils, I lost all my confidence to do anything with paint. And so I even went so far as to buy some canvases and never painted on them because I didn't want to leave the pencils. So it started out as a pragmatic thing and ended up as sort of a psychological necessity to use pencils. I just liked them. Well, there are a couple of things. The primary thing that gets me interested is color. That was the first thing, closely followed by shapes, at least as far as abstraction is concerned. I guess I should explain that there's actually two aspects to my pencil work. One is completely abstract drawings, and the other is various kinds of landscapes. I went to school in New Mexico. If you are from Washington and you go to New Mexico, you're either going to love it or you're going to hate it, and I loved it. And it's a desert environment. It's also a mountainous environment, and I really liked the sight of mountains, particularly as I usually saw them from campus, which was often a distance. And that led to the idea that I liked the space of the perspective of seeing mountains from a long distance away. It was the shape of the mountains made in profile against the horizon in the distance, and also the intervening space, which in New Mexico is often flat. So you have this great flat expanse, this great plain, and then you have these mountains off in the distance, and that whole space, empty space and mountains on the horizon, I liked. I like sand dunes in particular. I like dunes. I like dunes because of their the light and dark, the shadows. I like dunes because I like the earth tones, you know, the sandy beiges and browns, and I like the curved lines of dunes. If you ever look at a book of photographs of dunes, you're liable to come across some that look like body parts. Somebody's back, or the line of a back and a behind and the legs, and it's very suggestive of the human form as well. So I like that. And the other theme is sort of a third leg of my landscape theme is jungles. And I like those because, well, for a very simple reason. I like palm trees for one thing. I like tropical environments. But I also like the saturations of green colors. There are a million different shades of green in a jungle photograph. So that's three different aspects of my landscape work that show up in my drawings when I'm doing landscape work. When I walk my dogs, I take my camera, my iPhone camera, and I take a lot of pictures of flowers real close up so that I can study the way colors blend together. I have some nice pictures of rust on a metal planter, which were absolute goldmine of wonderful ideas for color. And the rust was golden brown and streaky as the water made trails down it, which was right up my alley. I just love that. So I took some pictures of that. It's all kinds of ways to get inspiration from me, anyway. Well, a lot of it, as I mentioned to you before, I spend a lot of time staring at the paper, both before I start and usually I have a piece of an idea. Almost never do I have a complete thought in my head in terms of what a completed drawing is going to look like. I really don't have any idea. But I'll have a piece of an idea. That idea could be some colors that I want to work with, or it could be some particular shape that inspired me, something I saw, or it can be a combination of both of those things. And it can also, in fact, be nothing. I've often started a drawing without a thought in my head. I just pick a couple of colors that I think are nice and just start to let the pencil wander around the paper, and then drawing actually seems to take its own form, emerges out of that process. There's artistic process, which is what I spoke about. But there's also a physical process to what I do. When I finish a drawing, there's a period of time that I usually let the drawing dry out. Now, there are water-soluble pencils. I don't use water-soluble pencils. I just use regular color pencils. But they're not lead. This is not colored lead. This is, it's a pigment in a wax suspension. So technically, what you're experiencing here is drying. In other words, when you lay down the color as thickly as I usually do, I usually put it on very thick, try to get as much color saturation into the paper as I can get. And what happens is that over time, the pigment and the wax in which it is suspended separate, which is sort of a drying process in quotations. And it leaves what they call a wax bloom, especially on some of the darker colors. It really shows up. You can actually run your finger through it and it'll leave a trace where you can see right through, it wipes it off. So I buff after the piece is finished and it's sat a couple of days. I take a soft cloth, a diaper, and buff it to get the wax bloom away. A lot of people, and then it's framed and then covered with a piece of plexiglass, usually non-glare plexiglass. And the reason I wanted to mention it is because some people come up, they look at a piece and they'll say, they'll think it's paint, and it's not. And I'll say, no, it's pencil. And they say, but I see brush strokes. And they are seeing brush strokes, but the brush strokes are the gel medium that's placed on top of the pencil. And then, of course, then the plexiglass goes on top of that. So there is a process, actual physical processing of the piece after it's finished. The biggest difference between the person who ends up being considered an artist and a person who isn't necessarily a level of talent. It's cultivating what talent you have, whether that be a huge amount of talent or a little amount of talent. You just have to do it. If you have that drive to produce something creatively, just go ahead and do it. Don't worry about whether it's good or not. You know, it's more important for you to develop a style, a language that you recognize as your own, and that's probably the most important thing, you know. And the only way you can do that is to do it enough so that style will emerge, that voice will emerge from the sheer persistence of having done it a lot. I don't care whether anybody buys it or not, or I don't even care if I show ever again. I'm doing this because it's part of what I do now. It's part of my life, and that's basically the most important thing. You know, I get more fun out of this than anybody else. You know, it's a great little secret. You know, that I'm having a really good time.